Kia ora, everybody. We'll get started. If everyone take their seats. Kia ora and welcome to the council meeting of Monday, the 19th of August 2024. In terms of health and safety, if the alarm sounds, please make your way to the nearest emergency exit. You'll see those marked around the room. The assembly point is across the road from the Bay of Plenty Regional Council building. Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and the video will be publicly available on YouTube. Members, could you please remember to speak clearly into your microphone and only one speaker at a time for clarity. You'll see if you push your button in front of you, it'll go green when your microphone's on. Could we please have our microphones as we go? And please, everyone, could we turn off our mobile phones? I'd like to start with an opening karakia, and could we please ask Puhuraki Ihaka to open the meeting for us? Thank you.
Morena, kia ora no tātou. It is my honour to open this hui with a karakia as befits our tikanga of mana whenua. Nō reira, inoi tātou, let us pray. He hono re he kororia maungarunga ki te whenua, whakaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. E tō mātou matanui te rangi kia tapu tō ingo, e pai e whakawhira ana mātou ki a koe mō tēnei wā, mō tō aroha tō manakitanga ki a mātou, kua hui mai I tēnei rā I rungi tu kaupapa nei. Arahi tia mātou e koe e roto I nei mahi, ko ihu karaiti tō mātou kai whakaora, ake, tonu ake, āmene, kia ora mai tātou.
Thank you very much, Puraki. I have received apologies for Councillor Hautapu Baker and Councillor Makari Sydney, who has been granted a leave of absence. Can I please call for a mover and a seconder? Mover, thank you, Councillor Morris. Seconder, Councillor Schuler. Oh, yeah. All those in favour? Aye. Aye. Those against? No. I declare that motion carried. We now move on to the public forum, and I would invite Nigel Tutt from Priority 1 to open us up. Nigel, you've got 5 minutes and then any questions after that. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks for having me today. So I'm Nigel from Priority 1 with the Economic Development Agency for this region. Some of you I know, some of you not, so we'll get to know each other a bit more in the future. And I'm here to talk about Te Manawa Taki o Te Papa and specifically the construction contract side of it. That's the part that concerns us. As the Economic Development Agency, we've had a fair bit to do with the CBD and its resurgence and the businesses within that over the last little while. So what I'll do is just provide you with some context around what's been happening, as much as I can do in 5 minutes, and a little bit about the risks should you either delay or not go ahead with that contract. And I just firstly wanted to acknowledge this is a really difficult decision early on in your tenure, probably not intended that way. So I just wanted to acknowledge that that'll be tough. Right, so really the CBD, as you'll see if you look out there, has gained significant momentum over the last few years. Developers and investors have choice in this. They either do things here or they do things in another city in New Zealand, and they've flocked back in. They've got a lot of confidence in where the CBD is heading, and that's really important for them because in any of these decisions, they'll be assessing whether they think, they're putting their own money up for risk. So they'll be thinking whether there's a confidence in the city ahead, because they know that the area is growing. They just want to know that council has confidence in that as well, and therefore their money, when they put it up for risk, is a little bit safer. We released a CBD blueprint a couple of years ago, had about $1.5 billion of investment over this decade. outlined in it. That's probably increased to 2 to 2.5 billion now. And if you look out the window, I think there's 7 to 8 construction cranes out there. There's 2 in Hamilton at the moment, just to give you a context of the gravity of things happening here versus other places. So there really is quite a lot of momentum at the moment. And look, we'd come and talk to any developer and investor about this stuff, but council has a special place within that. You set the tone and the environment for the CBD, and therefore, willingly or not, encourage other people to be part of that. What I thought I would do is just go through 6 pieces that have been happening just for context, kind of by category of stuff that's been happening. So firstly, there's council-led investments. I don't need to talk to you about that. That's in your own decisions, and you'll play the risk on that. Secondly, there's investments and developments where council is a partner of someone else, right? And that's really, really good. We definitely want to see that now, and we want to see that continue in the future. And pleasingly for us, that's not only been established developers in the city, it's also been new ones that have come to town. Should you delay or stop the project, you won't be viewed as a good partner in the future. And that is quite a high risk, I would have thought, for any of that type of development in the future. You simply won't be seen as reliable. It'll be a real challenge to get people alongside you. Private sector is the third piece. And that has been responsible for the bulk of the development in the CBD over the last few years. And most of what you see there, that has been either residential development or offices by and large. If you were to change to Manawataki or Te Papa, it would cause some risk to that. Obviously, anything in the ground and happening now, there's no risk to that. That will keep happening. Anything that might be a twinkle in someone's eye or going to happen in that probably 3 to 7 year period would obviously be a challenge. It would be very difficult to provide a compelling story as to why they would invest in the CBD. Because again, they need to know that the city's own council has ambition for the city centre for them to be part of it. There are others as well, University of Waikato, Ministry of Justice. I think there's low risk to those things. They'll by and large keep going. There may be some lack of intent if they don't have confidence, but I don't think that will change a lot. The last 2, though, I do think change a lot. So there have been a bunch of businesses move back into the city centre or signal that they're doing so. We're in the process of it at the moment, which is excellent. About 10, 15 years ago, we saw a flight of businesses out of the CBD where they would move their offices out. That's obviously detrimental to us to kind of create a scale around a place. So that has changed. And also we've seen a number of businesses either start businesses here or have branch offices that have grown from a couple of people to 20, 30, 100 type of business. And that is really important. We want those businesses, we want those jobs, and they will take a signal from council as to whether it's smart to be in the city centre or not. Right. So if you were to reduce what you're doing at Te Manawataki or Te Papa, it would simply send the signal to them that, no, this is not really a place for you. And then probably most importantly, retail. Retail being a relatively, it's kind of a medium-sized sector in this economy. We've worked really, really hard with retail. It doesn't, you don't need to be too well acquainted with the city to know that it's in fairly poor shape out there at the moment, and that's the last to come back. So what you need to do is to create other developments that then allow foot traffic to come back into the CBD, and then retail thrives off that, right? Retail doesn't come first. So all of the stuff under construction at the moment will be a boost, but we are reliant on Te Manawataki or Te Papa for foot traffic in the CBD as well. So if you were to say stop doing the library and community hub, that would definitely negatively impact foot traffic, and it would be much harder for retail to thrive just on the numbers game, but also on the intent, right? Imagine us trying to talk to someone about attracting them into the CBD. That's going to be a hard discussion. And that was my last point. Last, just wanted to finish with we're here to help, right? We're all on the same team here. We'll share a vision for the CBD, and we're here to help out any way we can. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Nigel, for your your thoughts. I'll just ask any of the councillors if they've got any questions. Rick.
Thank you, Nigel. It's great to be back around the table, and it's nice to see you here today. So in terms of sorry, I have to speak closely to the mic. In terms of your sort of emphasis on attracting retail customers back and the added foot traffic, have you quantified that? What's your understanding of the impact of Te Manawataki or Te Papa on the foot traffic. We're led to believe that it would be 3 times foot traffic. To me, that's not much because currently the foot traffic is very low. Have you guys thought about that number and what would that be?
No, we don't, and foot traffic's generally a little hard to quantify. The office developments and the likes will see thousands of people in the CBD, and Te Manawataki or Te Papa would add to that, particularly in kind of non-office hours, but we don't have the exact number on that, sorry.
Any other questions? Nigel, I've just got one question. Nigel, you sort of talk about that private development. Have you got updated figures on that as to exactly, what's going on in the CBD at the moment and the value of those projects?
Yes, we definitely do. We generally don't make those public because the people that give them to us on the basis that they're confidential, but we could give you a summed up figure if you'd like.
Yeah, no, that would be great if we could, have that. Thank you. Right, any other questions? All right, thank you very much, Nigel. I appreciate your thoughts. I'd now like to call on Puraki Ihaka from the Otamataha Trust to give us his thoughts on Te Manawataki o Te Papa. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Kia ora no tātou. E tuatahi kei te mihi atu ki a koutou ngā mema hau o te kaunihere o Tauranga Mona, o tēnei huhui o te ata nei. Nō reira, tēnei te mihi ki a koutou, katoa, ko taimai nei o roto I tēnei whare. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. For obvious reasons, I shall give my presentation in Te Reo Pākehā. However, I've noticed that Mr. Councillor Morris is back in the fold, and as being a councillor, I do recall my last conversation with him in his previous tenure as a councillor that he would take time out to learn Te Reo while he was on holiday, so to speak. So he's back again, so I hope you've picked up on your reo. Hoi anō. Kia koutou katoa ngā mihi kia koutou I rungi te kaupapa o tēnei rā. So I was unexpectedly given the opportunity to attend this hui this morning from the point of view as being the chair of the Otamataha Trust. The Otamataha Trust is a whenua Māori trust set up on behalf of two hapu, Ngai Tamarawaho and Ngāti Tapu, who historically and traditionally have held the mana whenua of this area for the last 600 to 700 years. Obviously, I'm not going to give you all a history lesson about who we are, where we come from, and what our position is today. Suffice to say that in the current climate of mana whenua, tangata whenua, etc., we have been through our treaty claims process with the Waitangi Tribunal, still working with the Crown to finish off our settlements in terms of Tauranga Mona. But in this instance, I'd like to talk about our relationship with the council, which had started off some 24 years ago when the Tangata Whenua Collective was established between all tangata whenua and Tauranga City Council within TCC's Rohe area. And we as mana whenua have taken the lead in terms of the relationship within the CBD, the city limits, so to speak. Through the resource management consenting process and through other relationships that we felt was something that needed to be built within the city. And I can honestly say that I believe that the relationship has increased tenfold since 25 years ago in terms of how we deal with issues. One of the issues in the sense of good and bad. In terms of this area that the kaupapa is about today, we commenced our discussions with the commissioners 3.5 years ago when they took office, and the concept of rebuilding the civic centre was discussed with us, and we were invited to participate with the commissioners in terms of putting our cultural mana whenua stamp on the project as a whole, in terms of the kaupapa, the concept, how it can and should help not only tangata whenua, but the community as a whole. One of the first things we set about doing was giving it a name. And so after long thought, we came up with the name of Te Manawataki o Te Papa, which means the beating heart of Te Papa, because we felt that if we wanted to make this the centre of the beginning of making something great in the city, it had to be the heart, and everything should go out from there. And so that was the initial thoughts. So the name was established and the work commenced in terms of that relationship. Our participation was in offering the cultural advice in terms of the features relating to the buildings, relating to design, relating to the use. Entwined with that was to ensure that it wasn't only tangata whenua Māori that was part of that concept, but also the whole of the community of Tauranga Moana. And we believe that from the beginning up until now, that we have achieved that objective in terms of making it a beating heart of the new civic centre, civic precinct for the city, for all of us. But to give tangata whenua through the mana whenua of the hapu involved their right of place in terms of honouring the history of the city from a Māori point of view and also from a Pākehā non-Māori point of view. And I believe also in that respect, the two histories have blended together in terms of the design features. And I invite you all to really have a good close look at all those design features and the proposals that have been put forward, and you will see that that is the case. As mana whenua, we are proud to be associated with this project, with the council in terms of the kaimahi, the workers, as well as the governors who at that time were the commissioners who took this project on from the beginning. But it was something that was shared amongst all the staff of Tauranga City Council in conjunction with tangata whenua. And again, I believe that that has been a resounding success thus far. I believe I've probably used up 4.25 minutes of my time. So I've got a little bit of time left over to answer any of your questions. So I thank you, Mr. Chair, mahe and the councillors for offering me this opportunity to speak on behalf of our trust in support of the work that has been done over the last 3.5 years, and hope it is not all for nothing. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, and thank you very much for your thoughts and sharing a little bit of that background. I'm very happy to hear that the relationship is improving, and we look forward to working with you going forward to continue that relationship. Have we got any questions from any of the councillors? Yeah, I'll hand over to Councillor Taylor. Thank you.
Thank you for your input there. Just a question, if the project was to stall and maybe get redesigned, what does that mean from mana whenua's point of view?
One thing we've learned over the time that we've been involved with central government and local government is 3 things: patience, endurance, and flexibility. So we would, if a decision was made to go in a different direction, change tack, whatever, well, obviously we would still, for us, we still have that place that we believe we hold, whether it be plan A, plan B, plan C, or plan X. It is of no consequence to us, because whichever one it is, we believe we will always have a part to play, and that we will give our best to input into wherever that direction takes us. Obviously, it would be a disappointment because of the things that have been planned, but we based on those other 3 principles I mentioned earlier, we'd be fine with that. By the way, there's one other thing I'd like to just mention that I didn't say within in my presentation, is that I'm sure you're all aware anyway, but I'm going to say that we're actually the half-share co-owners of that property. It's something that we hold very, very dear to us because of the emotional on our manua side of things.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it'd probably be good for us in the long term to get an understanding of actually what does it mean as far as revisiting what you've already put into it. Obviously, you've put a lot of work into making it a project that it is. So I'd be interested to hear a bit more later, maybe. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Have we got any other questions? Right, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts, and we'll move on to the next part of business. Thank you. So the next order of business is acceptance of late items. We have no late items, I don't believe. And we'll move on to confidential business to be transferred into the open. So there are 2 attachments to item 11.1, briefing to incoming council update, that I'm proposing to transfer from the confidential section into the open section of the meeting. Attachment 1 refers to the project funding updates council report to council 11 July 2024, and attachment 2 council resolutions 11 July 2024. I call for a mover. This. Thank you, Councillor Morris. Seconder, Councillor Crowther. To transfer these attachments from confidential into the open. Have we got any discussion? No. Therefore, I put the motion that transfers the confidential attachments 1 and 2 to item 11.1, briefing to incoming council update, into the open with immediate effect. Attachment 1, project funding updates, council report to council 11 July 2024, and attachment 2, council resolutions 11 July 2024. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? No. I declare that motion carried. Okay, we're just handing those attachments now out to the media. I'm sure if there's any members of the public that would like to see those. On the table down there. I now ask if there's any change to the order of business. No. And we have no minutes to confirm. I now call for any declarations of conflict from today's business. Right, no conflicts declared. We have no deputations, presentations or petitions, and there is no recommendations from other committees at this stage. So now I'd like to move on to the business section. And the first order of business is 11.1, briefing to the incoming council update. Christine Jones, General Manager, Strategy, Growth and Governments, will be speaking to the report. So thanks, Christine.
Thank you, Mayor Drysdale. So this report provides an update on some matters that were addressed by the previous council. So the previous council prepared an incoming briefing for the new council, and that was done in public, and a copy of that was provided to all candidates from the electoral officer. And it summarises the matters that the council thought were of strategic or importance, and that they felt was they needed to hand over, if you like, to the incoming council. That was done on the 10th of June and was current at that point. Subsequent to that, there were two significant things that happened outside of control of council and unexpected that we then reported to the council of the time, and that was done in close because we were having conversations with central government and other agencies. And there were two matters that were reported. One relates to Te Manawataki o Te Papa infrastructure funding and financing levy, and there's a separate report item on today's agenda, so I won't cover that in this report, but it was one of the matters that we did brief the council on. And the other one related to funding decision or a decision by the New Zealand Transport Agency with respect to the Cameron Road Stage 2 business case. So we reported both of those matters up in confidential to the council, and together with an action plan for things we felt needed to be addressed. And they instructed for an update to be provided at the first available business meeting of the incoming council. So that this is really your first business meeting. Your other meetings to date have been establishing your frameworks, etc., and you haven't had any matters of business items on those agendas. So I'll just give a quick overview of what the issue was and where we're at with it now. So you have been provided some briefings as part of the induction process about the way that transport funding occurs and the processes it needs to go through. And one of those is a requirement to have a business case approved by the NZTA board where it's over a certain financial threshold. Cameron Road was at that stage. Cameron Road is an urban transformation project. It is a project. Its primary purpose is to provide support and enable housing of greater density through the Te Papa corridor, which is part of our overall housing strategy, and to provide a key transport link, particularly multimodal, from the Western corridor, which has got quite a lot of growth and could end up in the long term having circa 20 to 25,000 homes in that corridor, to link that area through the Cameron Road towards the CPD and then across to the Mount. The project aligns really strongly with the Growing for Housing growth policy that the government has put out, where it talks around increased density and transport corridors and modes to support that. Cameron Road Stage 1, as you're aware, has been completed, but the full benefits of that project in terms of transport and urban transformation outcomes can't be achieved unless Stage 2 is actually fully put in place and completed. So we're currently reaping some benefits, and there's quite a lot of usage happening as part of that project, but not the full benefits until Stage 2 is completed. The other key point to be aware of in terms of Cameron Road Stage 2, because of the benefits that it delivered, we were able to put together a proposal to the government that resulted in them supporting a $68 million investment in that project through the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund. So they felt it had sufficient merit to support that level of funding. If the project does not proceed, then effectively we forfeit that investment by the Crown, which is a grant. It's not a repayable loan, it's a full grant to support the project. So when we became aware that the NZTA board had not approved the business case, and the particular reason for that was it didn't fully align, in their view, with the updated government policy statement that was issued by the coalition government post the election. We prepared an action plan, and that was supported by the outgoing council, and you'll see that's in an attachment, and you can see all the elements of work that have been happening since that June time period over the election period that we've been working on. Most of those have been completed. We've also provided you copies of the key correspondence between the Chief Executive, the Commission Chair, Ministers, and the Chair of NZTA. That work is now substantively complete, and we're up to the next stage, which is probably one of the key paragraphs in the report, is paragraph 16, which provides you the where to next of our plan to address this issue. And that phase 2 action plan has 3 core elements. One is to look at how we can progress urban accessibility, including active modes, while future-proofing the project and retaining flexibility, so investments of no regrets. How we can redesign the business case to more fully align with the government policy statement, and then to look at each of the elements of the projects individually and collectively and look at rearranging the funding stack so that we can get a benefit cost ratio exceeding 1, which is one of the measures you need to get through if you're going to be successful with funding. So there's 2 things we're trying to achieve here. One is to get the business case approved, step 1, and then step 2 is to secure funding through the funding streams that the government has so that the project can proceed. Business case needs to happen first before you can get in the queue for funding. So we're trying to achieve both of those things by these actions. So this report is an update report. We're not really asking for any decisions. We're just, as we should be, for putting it on the formal record and open, advising you as the incoming council and identifying those particular next step actions. And then when they're complete, that will come back to you, likely for a decision as to whether you support the revised business case and support the recommended pathway that the staff will put forward around funding. That's a subsequent decision for you to make. Happy to take any questions.
Right, do we have any questions for Christine? Councillor Taylor.
Just a quick one. You said that the benefits of stage 1 aren't unlocked until stage 2 is complete. Do you want to just give us a quick brief on what those things are?
Might need Nick to help me a bit because that's more in the transport space. There are some benefits that are already occurring because people are using the current bus and the cycle lanes, walking paths, and there have been improvements at intersections which enable the buses to go through more quickly. But in terms of the total corridor, for people to be able to safely commute on particularly cycles, they need the whole route. So if you're starting your journey further down Cameron Road, you'll basically be in amongst the traffic. There won't be a dedicated safe cycleway. And that is particularly an issue when you've got schools and the hospital. So school children and hospital workers could well use that. But at the moment, the work that we've done in the past has identified that people don't feel safe, and so they choose not to use those methods. And in terms of the bus journey, for the bus journey to get time savings, it needs to be able to have that whole corridor route with a level of priority all the way through it. Just checking I've passed the transport test. Perfect. Yeah.
Sorry. Councillor or Deputy Mayor Schooler. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Mahe. Thank you, Christine. I'd had the same question as Councillor Taylor, but also we talk to our people in Tauranga about value for money and the investments that are made. And I guess I'm a little bit surprised that you only have to get to cost benefit of your benefits are equaling your cost. And to me, that's still, with the fact that costs can come up, that seems quite a low bar. Is that where does that ratio come from, please?
So Morena Tato, that It comes from the investment framework for NZTA, basically, that stipulates that for them to invest in a project, it has to have a benefit cost ratio above 1. It does look at a very specific parts of benefits, basically. It's travel time, it's congestion, it's CO2 emissions, all those sorts of things that are calculated into benefits. It doesn't include broader benefits of business access and other developments. So if we look at Cameron Road Stage 2 has the business case that was put up was sitting at about 0.85, I think, to the dollar in terms of benefit cost ratio. If you include the broader benefits of development and benefits for the city, it sits at about 1.15. So there are different ways of calculating it, but the way that NZTA calculates it and governs it and judges it on the merits of a very basic set of criteria, basically. But the one comes from their investment assessment manual.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, or just a follow-up question.
Just a follow-up on that, I would anticipate that we should also be not wanting to put forward anything that comes below the 1. From a delivering value back, that certainly should be a bar for us as council as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess just in that we probably need to look at that from that community point of view rather than a straight NZTA calculation, because they're probably two different things. But I take your point. Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, just wondered, excuse me, if either Christine or Nick can clarify through the chair, the process that we're planning to take here. The National Land Transport Fund will be decided on the 31st of August, as I understand it. There'll be an announcement in early September. We will likely miss out on that cut for Cameron Road Stage 2. So the normal pattern would be that you would go through a whole extra business case process. You'd reapply, go through the regional land transport plan. That all takes quite a bit of time. And also, I guess in the current political climate, we know there's very, very little funding for anywhere, let alone a project that has, that struggles to get over 1, even with a redesign, it will not be a very high BCR. So what are we actually thinking in terms of the reality of that, the timing of that? So, and I'm thinking forward to, there are other big decisions to make for this council later this year. Do you realistically think we will have a clear decision around Cameron Road Stage 2 by, say, November, December?
No, I don't think we will. We'll be still working on that updated business case by that time. So it's very likely, or it's almost certain, I would say, that the NLTP will be exclusive of Cameron Road Stage 2. But that's not to say that nothing can change within that 3 years of the NLTP. So it's quite common that during an NLTP that there are variations and there's a specific process. So if your project is not approved or included in the NLTP as it is released in September, October time, there's still an opportunity to go through a variation to it during the 3 years of its implementation.
Just to add to that, I remember I talked about two things we're trying to achieve. One is the business case and one is the funding. If we don't get the business case, the funding won't flow. If we get the business case, and next year you didn't get it through this round of NLTP, there are other pathways. So there is a letter of best endeavours, and that's covered in the report that the previous government signed, and that was off the back of, if there is an approved business case, then there will be a conversation that we can have with the Crown. You've also discussions potentially around city and regional deals. So there are other ways that you could possibly engage with central government about funding, but if you don't have that business case approved, then those doors basically are not open to you. So I think we need to think about it in those two parts.
Thank you. Councillor Kurak.
Thank you. In terms of opportunities and pathways, given that this new government is going to focus on the roads of national significance, Do you think it's likely that some of these benefit cost ratios will be pushed up in terms of trying to prioritise those RONS projects, which will mean they will displace the lesser important projects, such as some of these that we're talking about?
So in terms of government announcements and disclosures to date, there hasn't been any indication that's the case. And there has also been, through the Growing for Housing Growth policy announcements, clarity that Minister Bishop supports corridors, transport corridors that delivered in a manner that supports housing intensity, including particularly bus lanes through those corridors. So I think the government policy framework is being developed as we speak. We know that, but he's made those clear statements in the last month and said that that's the case. And so previously there was a lot of focus on Auckland and Wellington in terms of bus provision to support housing. Now it's broader in the announcements that have been recently made. So I think there is an opportunity there. And this corridor absolutely fits in that bucket, as opposed, we have other multimodal projects, but they're not as strongly aligned to housing intensification as what the Cameron Road corridor is.
No, I think Councillor Taylor, did you have a?
Just a bit of clarification there, Nick. So the cost benefit getting above 1, you said there were some things that weren't actually included from an NZTA point of view, but are benefits to the community. Do you want to just maybe spell out what those might be?
Yeah, so like I said, the benefit cost ratios as they're calculated by NZTA are very square. So that's it's about emissions and throughput. It's about congestion, wait times, and that sort of thing, and specific calculations that are very transport related. There are, of course, benefits that are non-specific transport related, like development, access to businesses and commerce, etc., that are improved by a project like this. They are not calculated in the benefit cost ratio as per the manual, but they are benefits to the city.
Council, what that might look like?
Yeah, we do measure those, and that's why we have a BCR calculated as per the manual and a BCR calculated as per the broader benefits to the city, and they are different, and they are different on every project we have. So it's a very common practice for us that we do look at both. That's right, but it doesn't get us any higher on the ranking of projects, though, in terms of the ranking and then where the affordability line sits from an NZTA perspective.
So could you see a situation where NZTA funding wise we're struggling to get to 1, but from community benefit view we're getting well above?
I'm guessing here now, but I don't think that would help the case. They still have to go back to the fundamental number, basically, because that's how they rank it. But what we then have are other funding stack opportunities, like I touched on in the paper. So that becomes our opportunity to see what else can we do outside of the normal NZTA funding realm.
Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mayor Mahi. 2 questions. One, if the business case stacks up and receives the approval of council, will a long-term plan amendment be required as a result of changes to this project? That's the first question. Second question is, the former occupier of this place referred to Cameron Road Stage 1 as a failure and acknowledged the impact on businesses along Cameron Road, some of whom are no longer with us. What have we learned, and assuming that council approves the business case and assuming, another big if, that both funding from this body and external bodies is received, What have we learned to ensure that the impacts on businesses further up Cameron Road do not occur to the level that happened on stage one?
Through you, your worship, I think we'll break that into two parts. Firstly, the impact on the long-term plan. If I hand over to Paul Davidson, he can speak to that.
So in terms of the long-term plan amendment, it would really depend on what the flow-on ramifications were effectively of a funding plan that might change. So in terms of the project itself, it wouldn't be a significant change of level of service, therefore no change of no long-term plan amendment would be needed. But if you think that funding mix was altered significantly, it may not necessarily trigger an amendment, but it would potentially trigger the need to consult or look at changes of funding to support that.
In relation to the delivery of Cameron Road Stage 1, council could have done a lot better. I think that's acknowledged. As a result of that, the commission sought a review and engaged Tucker and Darlow to come in and do that review into the delivery of stage 1, which actually started back at the concept and procurement phase of that right through to essentially completion. Now, Cameron Road Stage 1 was, the concept was developed during COVID lockdown. It was part of the shovel ready project and program of works that government funded. I think it might have been Easter 2021. The team pulled together in very short time, I guess, the cost estimates and plan for that project. We estimated at the time it was going to cost somewhere in the area of $45 million to deliver. On top of that, we had to invest $27 million in upgrading our water pipes. The end product itself, I think, is visible today and I think speaks for itself, but there's definitely acknowledgement that in terms of delivery, we could have done a lot better. As a result of the Tucker and Darlow report, one of the recommendations was that we establish a dedicated major projects unit. We've done that. We attempted to work with NZTA to essentially deliver and build a joint delivery project unit for the 5 major projects across the city, which are Cameron Road Stage 2, Tauranga West Enabling Works, Turrets 15th, Papamara East Interchange, and connecting Monganui, which essentially is Totru, Hewlett's, Hull and Monganui roads. So collectively, those projects in total value probably north of $1.7 billion. And it's a level of project delivery that this organisation has not had the capability historically to deliver. In fact, the project, Cameron Road Stage 1, which came in at around $110 million, is the largest transport project that this city has ever managed. So we've realised that this isn't business as usual for our transport team, and that focused unit has been established. So, and it's overseen by a panel of 3 senior transport export experts who have been involved in large-scale transport projects across the country, who are adding value to the way that we're delivering those projects. Of course, Tauranga West Enabling Works, $230 million project is currently under construction at the moment, as is the Papamara East Interchange. You've heard that Cameron Road Stage 2 is back to the drawing board in terms of its business case, and next Monday, Council will be receiving and hopefully endorsing a revised business case for Turrets and 15th. We've organised, or in the process of organising, for NZTA, who are leading the business case for connecting Monganui to come and speak at the upcoming committee meeting that's overseeing projects. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Just one just follow-up question on that. You talk about the 110 million that ended up costing. Can you give us a breakdown after we've got NZTA funding, obviously the shovel-ready money, as to what the cost to ratepayers, the total cost to ratepayers was for that project?
Yeah, I don't have that at hand, but we can certainly provide that information.
Thank you. Councillor Schuler, do you still have a question? Okay, thank you. I just have one question around the timing of, I guess, giving that business case to NZTA, and obviously the GPS change there's a draft GPS, I believe, in December. And I'm just interested to hearing around that timing as to where that kind of got to.
So we submitted the business case, I think from memory, early in 2024. The draft GPS was out, and VOS, which is the NZTA's Value, Scope and Outcomes Committee, considered the Cameron Road Stage 2 business case in light of, and we're aware of, the draft GPS, and their minutes of their meeting show that they did recommend to the board for approval with some conditions, but they did recommend it for approval to the board. So they took into account the GPS. When it got to the board didn't concur with the recommendation that they received from that committee. So sort of how the timings went. The business case was meant to go to an earlier board meeting, and it was deferred, I think, two times. It was pushed out to subsequent board meetings, and that was a decision that was made by NZTA. It had been approved by TCC and it was waiting.
Thank you. Councillor Roseburn.
Yeah, mine's a two-part question. You mentioned the $68 million grant earlier. That's in relation to waterworks. Does it have a time frame on it? And if the funding for the Cameron Road Stage 2 doesn't come shortly, can we apply that funding to another project? Thank you.
So because it relates to a project that's got transport, and this is no different from other projects around New Zealand who are in the same space, because of the NLTP program, it's not going to be confirmed till September. We entered into a variation so that fund is managed by Kāinga Ora Funding, so not Kāinga Housing. They've got a arm that deals with funding. So we entered into a variation with them to extend the milestones. So the contract has a series of milestones that you need to meet in terms of delivery, but of course we can't proceed because we don't have the funding confirmed. So we extended that out to September, as did other councils. The day after we had signed that variation with Kāinga Ora, we got the notification, day or two after, from NZTA saying the business case hadn't been approved. So the current status is that variation is in place with that September timeframe. We would, I think, once we've carried out the actions that we're suggesting, we would engage back with Kāinga Ora. I mean, they would be looking for a funding package. They're probably not, if we can find other funding sources or pull together a different funding stack that still enables the project to proceed and for the benefits that they've purchased to still be delivered, that would be the key thing, then I think generally they would be open to a conversation, but that would be what they would be looking for. So the project would still have to deliver the benefits that were the reasons why they supported it in the first place. Yeah. So there's still discussion to go there, but we have a bit of a time frame available just because of the way those decisions and the variation for the funding was signed and the timeframes around that.
Okay, thanks for that. I think just in sort of summing up, this council very much wants to deliver value for money. I think it's important that any ongoing work, we're very much looking to align to that GPS, and the throughput, I guess, is an important thing that we're going to do. But I think it's also having this IAF funding of 68 million is obviously very important because that helps deliver some of that value for money rather than digging up Cameron Road. to do the pipes and then redoing it to do the road. So I think we've got to take that into account going forwards. But thank you very much, Christine, Nick and Marty for answering those questions. I'd like to move on if there's any further discussions between the councillors. No, we're we're all good then. Therefore, I call for a mover for the motion. Oh, sorry, I think we've had a few changes, have we? Yeah, we'll just.
The attachments are into dope.
Okay, yeah. I'll just get Coral to bring that up on the screen so we know what we're. Okay, so that's the updated recommendations. Have I got a mover? Yep, certainly, yeah.
So the change is just that the attachments. Sorry, the change is just that the attachments were in 1 and 2 were in public excluded, and you were going to put those into public, but you'd already done that. So it's just noting that you've done that. That's all. That's the only change.
I'm just famous for a bit of spelling and grammar. Just C. There we go.
Right, has everyone had an opportunity to look? Yes.
I'm just thinking in terms of D, whether that captures the intent of what we're trying to do, because from my point of view, I would think that's an extra step further. I would like to, that, you know, like at some point to have the business case presented and then decide whether to seek endorsement.
Yeah, so that's actually covered in that paragraph that refers to. I can so paragraph 16 that's referring to is the action plan phase 2 includes exploring the opportunities to progress with urban accessibility, including active modes aspect of a project through retaining future-proof flexibility within the design and configuration of a funding stack, developing a revised business case which more strongly aligns with the GPS, analysis of the individual components of the project to understand the benefit cost ratio of each, and ensuring the business case funding requests has components which individually and collectively exceed 1. Sorry, that didn't cover that, but there was.
Perhaps if I can clarify.
Yeah.
So what we're saying in there is that when staff are doing that, they are, the ultimate goal that they've got in their mind is to be able to get endorsement of a business case, and then that business case would ultimately be drafted in a manner that could secure funding. So it's not, you might want to have another resolution that says notes that the revised business case will come back to council for a decision, but what we're trying to say there is the work that we will be doing has got this ultimate goal, because if that's not the ultimate goal, then we've missed the target. That's really what we're trying to say. But you may, I think your point is perhaps note that a further report will come to be presented to council for a decision on an endorsement or otherwise of the business case, because that's your decision. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Christine.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, just as a matter of course, the NZTA board won't consider these business cases unless they have been endorsed, but this resolution just makes it specific.
I'll just give everyone an opportunity to read that, see if they're agreeable. Right, is there any further discussion on that? Therefore, I ask for a mover of that resolution, councillor Crowther, a seconder, councillor Rosenboom. I put to council that we receive the report briefing to incoming council update, formally receives the briefing to incoming council prepared and adopted by the previous council. Notes that attachment 1 and 2 were transferred into the open section at the start of the meeting. Notes that the action plan to continue to seek endorsement of a business case and ultimately secure funding for Cameron Road Stage 2, as outlined in paragraph 16 of the briefing to incoming council update report. Note that a further report will be presented to council on an endorsement or otherwise of the business case for Cameron Road Stage 2. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? No. That motion is carried. Thank you. The next item of business is 11.2 Te Manawataki o Te Papa infrastructure funding and finance IFF resubmission and the library community hub contract. Again, I'd like to call Christine Jones, General Manager, Strategy, Growth and Governance, as well as Paul Davidson, Chief Financial Officer, will be speaking to the report and will begin with a short presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and councillors. Yeah, just a very brief presentation just to go over what is IFF, why we've used it and how we've used it to date. And then importantly, some of the recent changes that have been announced and the potential implications of what that would be. So only half a dozen or so slides, so I'll just go through these. Firstly, IFF, it's a legislative financing tool that came under the Infrastructure Funding and Financing Act. Tauranga was the first council to use it for the transport system plan. Wellington have used it for a sludge proposal since. And currently we've got obviously looking at one for Te Manawataki o Te Papa. It's off balance sheet debt, often longer term. So the levies we've looked at are 30-year levies. It comes through it's a levy paid by the benefiting residents. So in this case, or for transport and for Te Manawataki, that's been assessed as a citywide benefit. Effectively, even though it's a levy, it's a rate. It appears on the rate bill. It looks and feels for a ratepayer as a rate. But it is off balance sheet, facilitated through Crown Infrastructure Partners. And probably that last is an important point, is that given that it's 30-year and not funded through our normal local government funding agency, it's normally at a higher borrowing rate than what the local government funding agency would attract. Thanks. While we've used it in the past, I'll show a slide in a moment which just talks about our constrained balance sheet. In the past, we have used a concept called debt retirement rates, which is where we've actually rated to pay debt down in order to manage that balance sheet. What the effect of that has been a higher rating cost in earlier years. It has allowed us to continue with infrastructure for housing and transport and the like. One of the things, we spoke about the letter of best endeavours on the previous topic, but it does ensure a level of commitment, arguably, in terms of attracting external investment, simply because it is actually locked and loaded for the levy term, which is 30 years. So it doesn't change. And because of that, it also provides that certainty for ratepayers, because they know what the amount will be now and into the future. And that's that last point on transparency. Just what we've got intact at the moment. So our transport IFF levy, $60 to $70 residential. These are median values, and $600 to $650 for commercial. They came into effect on 1 July this year. So we've just gone through the first round of invoicing for the first round of IFF. And then for Te Manawataki, the ranges we consulted on, 108 to 128 residential, with commercial 393 to 464. What I would say on that is that the differentials that were applied between the two are different. Transport obviously has a higher commercial use, industrial use, and therefore that is a higher differential than what it has been for Te Manawataki, which is therefore a lesser split between the residential and commercial. So on the 8th of August, an announcement was made by the Minister of Local Government. Two important parts to that. The first coming into from immediate effect was the ability of the local government funding agency to lend directly to water entities. And the other important announcement was looking at a bespoke lending arrangement for growth councils, which we're obviously one of those, which would increase our current limit, which is at 285, dropping to 280% of debt to revenue, and that will move up to 350%. It's a bespoke arrangement, and two important points of that. One is it's up to, and the other is that it may have a time restriction around it. That's part of the how we would actually take that through going forward. The other important point to note is it's still got to go through a shareholder council vote of the local government funding agency shareholders, and that is planned for November this year. We would then make an application to the local government funding agency for that bespoke covenant. It's fair to say that we're confident on both of those things happening, but what is probably a little bit less unclear at the moment is just that last point. And Standard & Poor's have published recently, last Monday, effectively some just their view on that it may have implications on credit ratings, both of ourselves and the local government funding agency, which may flow through to borrowing rates. Thank you. So just what that means for us now, the hard red line was what we were looking at when we set the long-term plan. The blue line would show what would happen if we actually had on balance sheet for Te Manawataki. Clearly we'd be in breach for periods of the long-term plan, but as you can see, that the bespoke covenant gives us quite a bit of capacity to actually, that is no longer an issue within in that regard. So just what does it mean? In the current year, I think the important point on this is that with the IFF levy, even though it was due to come in place on 1 July 2025, we were actually drawing down borrowing on that in the current, or plan to draw down borrowing in the current financial year. So what the debt that we would draw through that, plus some changes in cash flow, amount to 54 million. So that 54 million isn't new debt, but it's a transfer of debt that would have been off balance sheet through the IFF financing tool to council's balance sheet effectively this year. Again, because we didn't have any rates planned to cover that debt and the interest cost of that debt this year, based on the cash flowing of what that 54 million would look like, we'd be looking at around $1.5 million of rating impact in the current financial year that we'd look to find funding for. And then in the 2026 year, obviously the levy is gone, so that was projected to be 2.2% into the following year. It'd be or could be replaced, and that would be a conversation through the annual plan as whether a targeted rate or other rating mechanism or changes to the capital program are used to fund it. So that's just an introduction to the paper on the IFF, what it means, and the changes that have happened since the 8th of August. So in terms of the resolutions, what we've put forward now based on the new information is that we don't proceed with the IFF levy at this point in time. We have tabled some additional resolutions, which just gives us some flexibility in the event that we can bring back to you if there are potential implications on credit ratings of both LGFA and us and what that might need to borrowing costs. And then the other resolutions effectively are in place to actually allow us to fund the project this year, both from a debt perspective and from a rating perspective. We don't forecast any breaches of our limits until at least the end of the calendar year. So we've got some time to work that through before that shareholder council meeting. If that shareholder council meeting wasn't favourable and it didn't go through, we would bring back options at that point in time.
Speak to the second issue in the report, which is around the construction contract. So there was a delegation that the previous council made to the chief executive to be able to enter into contracts. But because the letter was received from the minister and there was no clarity as to whether or not the incoming council would choose to do IFF and therefore whether that was likely, that delegation wasn't exercised. There is a need for a decision to be made because the contractor is unable to continue on site without that contract in place beyond about this week. So it's either a case of the council approving the contract being entered into, or the other alternative, if that doesn't occur, is the contractor will demobilise and remove from site because they won't have any certainty of a contract being in place. And that's really just a factor of the timing of the minister's decision, the election, and a governance body not being around to make those decisions, and the chief executive being unable to exercise the delegation due to this change in circumstance. So that's the second issue to be dealt with.
Thank you very much for that. I understand there's a few additional wording recommendations, particularly in D, F, and J, which will be shown on the screen when we get to that motion. And staff have also signalled they'll be tabling a further attachment 5 in the confidential part of the meeting for consideration. This relates to theoretical termination cost advice from Ryder Levitt Bucknell. But in the meantime, if we've got any questions for either Paul or Christine, Councillor Kurak.
Thank you, Christine. Now, just touching or going back to the capacity, more debt capacity that we're looking at achieving. How are we looking in terms of the bigger picture regarding, well, more specifically, the growth-related projects that support housing in a wider context? How are we looking moving forward, and is there potential that we'll need to bring forward stuff that's currently not in the LTP, bring forward to accommodate that growth? And how is it all looking in terms of fitting in these sort of figures that we're looking at in this project?
Might have a go at it, and Paul might want to add. Perhaps we could go back to the slide that had the graph on it, if that's possible. So because the outgoing council, one of their terms of reference was to complete an LTP, and because the minister's decision on the timing of the election, it meant that they had to do a long-term plan much earlier than everybody else. And the outgoing government had the assumption was that waters, where we were at with waters in or waters out. And so the LTP was required to be prepared on the assumption that waters was included. But we knew that the reality would likely be that there would be government policy changes that meant that waters would be able to be off balance sheet in some way. So we had to prepare a long-term plan with a capital program within the debt levels with waters in, knowing there was probably going to be some solution that would have it out in some sort of different debt arrangement. So that's probably the first important point to think about when you look at these lines. So, and so the council, the outgoing council, had no option but to proceed. They had to get on with an LTP, and they had to get on with it earlier, and they had to include waters. So they had to find a way to deliver a capital program below the red line that's here, and so they set about making some prioritisation decisions to achieve that. And one of the most significant areas that they took a slightly different approach to was growth. And so they adopted a series of principles that where land was already zoned, so where it was zoned for residential or business land, and developers or landowners weren't able to progress because the infrastructure wasn't in place, that infrastructure should be included in the long-term plan. where infrastructure was able to be delivered and some external funding was being sourced that would disappear. So that's things like the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, or where we had developer agreements in place where developers would co-fund, that would proceed. Where there were resilience issues, and there's some of those across the network, and particularly in some of the water spaces where there are some risks to continuity and certainty of supply in natural hazard events such as flooding, etc., they were to be invested in. And there's also, they also wanted us to proceed with projects that were interdependent. So sometimes you're putting, you're upgrading a road and it makes sense to do the water pipes underneath. We were putting in infrastructure to support the Wairaki urban area. And if we built it a little bit bigger, it would service the Tumu area as well. So it makes sense to proceed with that. So those were the sort of guidelines that the outgoing council gave staff. And then we took a number of other projects out, and one of the largest areas we took out was Te Tumu, and that was because the land acquisition is not yet secure. We haven't progressed a plan change, so it's not zoned, and we don't know the timing of zoning yet, so we don't know when the infrastructure will be required. And so on the basis of that, it was moved out beyond the 10-year period. So a number of capital growth projects were pushed out. Intensification was similar, so the council noted that development could occur into Papa Peninsula, particularly there was areas, not everything could proceed because not all the infrastructure could in place, but there was opportunity for the market with the capacity that was there, and so they weren't stopping that from happening. It couldn't happen, but it just couldn't happen everywhere. So that's sort of so there is quite a lot of expenditure that relates to growth that was pushed out, but those were the principles that were applied. So in that overall equation, I suppose, if you like, knowing that when the water situation changed, it would totally change the balance sheet situation and council could relook at it. I don't know if you want to add anything else, Paul.
So just on that, so what's the likelihood of this council bringing back in some of those projects, or is that unlikely?
That would be a decision that would come back to council. As Christine said, it would be towards the back end of the 10-year plan where some of that expenditure could come back in. If that was just, I think the other important point to note with any expenditure coming back in is not just the balance sheet capacity, but the affordability to paying for it. Even though that a lot of that would be growth and DC funded, it still has an OPEX flow on that does hit existing ratepayers. So that affordability is really important through that piece as well.
That's going to be my next question. Thank you for bringing that forward. Oh, can I speak into the microphone? So members, I think we just need to bring our mics a bit closer. So in terms of this project and the impact on the ratepayer, what is the total impact, IFF rates or whatever, to the ratepayer of Te Manawataki or Te Papapa? I saw a list of the total operating costs, and I did a quick division of 60,000 properties, but then I got a figure of 433. Would that be sort of ballpark?
Just double check. Like there's obviously two parts of it. There's the OPEX costs that flow on from the project, which include the interest, and what we'd included in the business case was our traditional borrowing cost, which what I would say is would have been higher under IFF. It will be less through LGFA and approximate what was included within that business case. But I'd have to just do a calculation to check that.
Would that be possible in this time frame of the meeting? Oh, thank you.
I think just to add to that, what was approved by the Commission was an IFF levy up to about $128 per average residential or average ratepayer. So, yeah, I think the good thing about any borrowing going forward, it should be significantly cheaper than that. But I'll hand to Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mayor Mahi. Encouraged earlier today that any changes to the level of service on Cameron Road may trigger an LTP amendment. Bringing $150 million on balance sheet, is that going to trigger an amendment? If not, why not?
So Christine could probably jump in terms of our LGA, but amendments effectively required because of significant changes of level of service. It would require a consultation because it's in the introduction of a rate effectively within there. But it possibly would not be triggering an amendment. Difference would be it doesn't need to be audited and go through a whole 10-year process effectively. Although it would possibly, it'd be something that we would look back and bring advice back, because if, for example, it was going to be a targeted rate, it might be easier to do through an amendment rather than doing it through each annual plan. In answer to Councillor Cureck's question too, my very quick calculation was $448.
So that would be to the residential, because we do have differentials or significant differentials. That's be ballpark figure.
Very ballpark.
Sorry,
Yep.
448. 448. Right, thanks.
So would that be likely less though for a residential rate considering the differential?
Yeah, that's right. That would be like overall average. So the commercial will, generally be, if you're 440, I don't like making up numbers on the spot, but it will be higher because of that general differential that's applied. And again, what we would do is bring those options back through an annual plan or LTPA in terms of what targeted rate options, and then council could look at the differential that was set between the two at that particular time, based on some of that beneficiary work that's been done as well.
Yeah. Have we got any other questions for Christine or Paul? Councillor Crowther.
Just a specific question in terms of the 1.5% increase in rates for this financial year, and the whatever the figure was, for the next year. Sorry, was it 2.2? Can we maybe go forward on the couple of slides?
The levy was forecast would be a 2.2% increase next year.
But if we just go to that. Oh, sorry, the 1.2. Yep. So is that saying that unlike the levy, which would be front loaded more for it, this one would increase in stages as construction continues? Well, in other words, when you look at the long-term plan, the figures were 2.8% for this financial year, 2.2%, and then it dropped back to 0.3%, 0.1% increases in the IFF levies. So now are we saying the equivalent increases in rates will not progress in that same downward?
No, look, this is a very high level approximate that was done for today. We'd run it through properly, but that's really trying to show what the difference would be because of the lower borrowing costs. So you wouldn't be seeing a big uplift in that targeted rate on an annual basis. So we would bring this back in more detail in terms of an annual plan, in terms of what it would look like. It's really trying to say though that there's an interest saving effectively through the LGFA that would be passed on to ratepayers through that process.
Point of clarification through the chair. Are we saying that the actual total increase, on the previous year's rates would drop by 1% because we're using a cheaper form of financing?
If you count the increase in rates as rates plus levy, yes.
Then through the chair, why on earth did the commissioners choose to use the IFF for transport funding?
Because at the time that the balance sheet issue was similar in terms of running out of capacity.
Is there any other questions for the staff? Just for Paul and Christine. Yep. All right. Thank you, Paul and Christine, for your time and answering our questions. I'd now like to move on to any discussions between the council. I'd just like to start to say, this is some pretty big decisions, I guess, very early on in being a council, and I appreciate the work that everyone has done to try to understand these, so we can have a good conversation and hopefully make some good decisions today. I'd like to reiterate, I guess, that this is very much a project that we've inherited from the commissioners, And, I think as part of that, it's, we just have to be careful what we can and can't change. I guess with that inheritedness, there is significant risk to the ratepayer in making decisions to pause or change this project. And I think we'll discuss some of that. I think sort of further to Glenn's question, in some ways this IFF, and I know we've been getting our heads around what IFF is, but these decisions were forced because of that lack of headroom on balance sheet. And I don't think that is a good way to make a decision. And so it's something I guess I'd just like to say to our council that, we have to be very prudent with our debt and affordability to give us good options. In saying that, I think IFF does have a place. And, I think it has been communicated to the government that there can be some improvements made to the model to make this easier and cheaper. So I think that is something that the government are very aware of and have sort of given us an indication that they are looking at it, to improve this system. I think IFF is obviously a tool, but having that debt on our balance sheet is better in my regard, because it's one, cheaper, and two, for that transparency. At the end of the day, it's debt, whether you pay a levy or whether you pay the interest on the debt, it's all debt, and our ratepayers have to take that up. Obviously, the government announcement that we had has given us some breathing space, and hopefully that gives us an opportunity to make some good decisions around these things, rather than being forced into using different systems. I was very uncomfortable with the IFF in a interest rate environment that rates are reducing and potentially will reduce quite rapidly, with the latest announcement from the Reserve Bank that we were going to lock our ratepayers in on a fixed rate for the next 30 years, possibly towards the top of interest rate environment. So I think this is going to end up as a very good solution if we go for the LGFA funding, because it's going to be cheaper and ultimately will save our ratepayers money over time. And obviously that, it's as I said before, we've got to be prudent though, that we do take into that account that affordability and that we continue to not just spend all the headroom we have, else we'll get ourselves back into a very similar situation. Just listening to today and what we've sort of done around Te Manawa o Te Papa is, I think there is an important piece to play here, that we need to invest and revitalise our CBD. We have a role to play in allowing that confidence in our council, that we're when we do something, obviously we didn't make that decision, but that we're not, that people do believe that we're going to do what we say we do, and as again, there is a large risk to the ratepayer if we are going to make decisions to I guess stop or cancel this project. There could be a situation where effectively there's a big amount of ratepayer money down the drain and they get nothing for it. And if we were to resurrect a similar project, that ultimately it could cost more. So I guess those are the sort of things that how I see it and to take into account. But it is important now that we have a discussion, we hear all the views around the table before we make a decision. So Councillor Kure.
Thank you, Mayor Mahay. Mine is not discussion because earlier we were asking questions of Christine and Paul, but I've got a series of about 4 questions here that I'll probably more appropriately put to the Chief Executive, if I may, because I think your members probably all do have some questions to ask. Is that okay? Yep. So given your comment about money down the drain and who I've been speaking to out in the community, there's this real feeling that we've been put in this situation by the previous governance, and it's very difficult to wind back. And I've said to people, chances are that, this project will be locked in because that was the aim, because they wanted 2 years extra in their term to try and lock this project in. And from what I see, they certainly have done that. And for us to reverse out of it would be quite costly and could be seen as being foolish. So in terms of the actual cost, if I ask the question, how much would it cost to put the project on hold until, say, the end of October, give us some breathing room, allow us to get some more information and go back out to the community with that level of rate number, 448 for the project, once it's all completed and all operating, and how do people feel about that? And how much would it cost if we just decided, subsequently after connecting with our people, that we sort of looked at potentially cancelling the project? Could we be given that number publicly? Because that sort of number is important in telling our people how we arrived at this decision today. And if not, why the confidentiality?
Sorry, Rick, I just want to clarify, you mentioned the figure 448. I think the Te Manawa Taki o Te Papa is 306.
No, sorry, that's what the rates will be at the completion of the project on the ratepayer.
Oh,
per
okay.
year.
Sorry.
448
Yep.
per year.
Yep. No, thanks for clarifying that. Yeah.
Through you, Your Worship. Look, I think the most accurate and detailed information available to council is that which has been provided by RLB in the public excluded document today. Obviously, there's some commercial and legal and contractual sensitivities in relation to any decision that council makes today. And I think that information in that document may be subject to those types of negotiations in the event we end up in some sort of dispute. That's not to say that that I think a high-level broad brush dollar figure and cost of delay or deferral is something that I think we could probably work up with the parties. I wouldn't like to make that decision on the fly today, but I think you're right that the number is significant and the cost of delay is significant, and at the soonest opportunity, I think, depending on the decision council make, the public should have some indication.
Thank you, Chief Executive. So you mentioned our RLB. So GCC sought an opinion from RLB, the quantity surveyors, and clearly I remember reading that report, and it was prefaced by the fact that it is only its opinion. So that immediately triggered to me, well, why didn't we go to our partners, Willis Bond or LT McGuinness being the contractor? Because normally in my process, if I was doing a project and it looked like we were running out of money and would find it hard to deliver, I'd go to my builder and say, hey, if I wanted to delay this or cancel it, what am I up for? Rather than going to a third-party quantity surveyor and say, well, give us your opinion on what it would cost. Why don't we go and get it straight from the horse's mouth? Because these companies are reputable companies, and so they would give us a substantive answer that we can then rely on. But I've got discomfort in relying on an opinion from another party that's not directly the party that we are entering this contract with.
We had preliminary discussions with LT McGuinness and Willis Bond, but at that stage, we were speculating on the opportunity or otherwise to defer, delay or cancel contracts, which ultimately, I don't know that LT McGuinness, who we are in contract with or about to sign another contract with, could at that stage put a number on what it might cost. RLB possibly relied on some of the information that may well have been available through that conversation. I'm not sure, Mike Norday, whether you're able to assist or whether RLB did a desktop exercise. But it would seem a wee bit odd going to someone that we're in contract with and asking what the cost of termination would be.
Would be weird.
It would be somewhat odd.
I wouldn't share that opinion.
Absolutely, yeah. It's they've got dozens of staff on site. They've got machinery and equipment on site. They've gone out and provided apprenticeships for young people in our community, and for us to enter into that type of conversation before council have made any decision, this would be a somewhat unusual.
I think ultimately it would come down to a negotiation, and it is similar, I guess, to the Cook Strait ferries. I don't think they can put a cost on it because it's a negotiated process, and if you went to the company, they're going to tell you a much larger figure than probably is the correct one. That would be my two cents.
Or not.
A point of order, if I may, Your Worship. Just trying to figure out where we're at in terms of question / debate / motion on the table.
Yes, sorry. Well, we're basically, having any discussion at the moment, and should be between councillors. I guess if we require further information, I'm happy to involve staff, but we can continue between the council if that's all right.
Just for my clarity, so we're in a phase where we're having discussion amongst ourselves, and then the appropriate time something will be moved, and then we'll enter into that more formal
absolutely,
debate phase. Good, thank you.
Yeah. Has anyone else got any points to add, or Deputy?
Up there before, Mike, could he?
I think.
Well,
I guess I'm happy to hear from Mike if you, okay, we'll give Mike an opportunity to answer that question.
Through Your Worship, I think the specific question was whether or not RLB had any communication or otherwise with LT McGuinness in coming to their findings.
Good morning. Just in response to that, RLB are our QS for the entire project, and so they have worked through the project with the Willis Bond and the LT McGuinness team. They have reviewed their tender. They understand where we are with the letters of instruction, and so they are the best company to be able to provide us with a surety that the figures that you have in that confidential attachment are accurate and correct. You will note in that attachment there are a number of exclusions, and so I think you need to be cognizant of the exclusions and the potential financial impact of those should you not proceed with the contract.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, Councillor Curran.
Thank you, Mike. So you don't feel that an opinion from RLB, get the acronym right, you think an opinion is conclusive. So, yeah, in terms of it being an opinion, okay, they might have spoken to the builder. Well, what's your feeling about, the potential if we actually went directly to the builder, sat around, and wouldn't that be more definitive in terms of certainty of what that figure would be?
Oh, Councillor Curry, I think we'll move on from this because I think that's answered and it's a negotiation process. So this would be something that would be negotiated, but we've obviously got an opinion, and you can take it as an opinion, and whether you believe that's probably a discussion, within council, and I'm happy to have you, give your views on that if you'd like. Oh, have you got, you don't want to?
Oh, I do have another one. Do a certainty of achieving full funding, if we can get that answered in terms of that non-ratepayer funding. How's it looking at the moment? If I can just have a brief summary on that. Is it 100% sure? And if it means a lot of asset sales, have we got certainty around that asset sale and what that will deliver in terms of yield?
So nothing's certain until the money's in the bank, but we have more than enough asset sales to cover the amount of external funding. So the combination of, we have money from water reform funding still available. We have TECT money available. We have loans available through both parking activities and the airport activity, and asset sales which exceed the amount of the 150 million that's required of external funding.
Okay, have we got any other questions for staff? We might move on to discussions. Councillor Crowther.
Well, yeah, in light of Councillor Kurak's question, can you also just give the same answer in terms of the funding of, which is highly significant, of I think 46 million from memory, for the parking fees, and whether that is additional funding, in other words, additional to what the sort of status quo option would have been, or whether that is just basically taking a chunk of the parking fees that the council would have received anyway?
So the process on the parking buildings was that they went for separate consultation, which was a conversation with the community about whether to dispose of those parking buildings and realise that into the asset realisation and hold them or not. The decision was made effectively to hold them. That the money generated through the parking activity is based on forecast growth in city centre numbers and forecast growth in parking parking daily rates effectively within there. So that money would be coming into council regardless, effectively within there.
Councillor Crowther.
So there is not a built-in differentiation. There's not a differentiation between the sort of the fees that would have been incurred without Te Manawataki Stage 2 and the fees, or the CWEM basically.
There is a volume assumption difference, which is based on greater uplift, which is we heard earlier about the increased foot traffic, for example. So there is a volume assumption increase effectively coming through from Te Manawataki and when the project is completed.
But through the chair, just to clarify, is the 46 million represents more than just that additional or marginal increase in funding from that uplift?
It's based on the total amount of debt that could be supported through the parking activity, not just the change, yes.
So not necessarily external to business as usual, let alone external to council, just to...
Yeah, the amount of debt, if I could rephrase it, the amount of debt that will be able to be funded without the project would be less because of that volume uplift. But nevertheless, the increase in value will create the ability to fund projects through the parking activity.
But we'll move on from any further questions with staff. So can we move back, and I'll hand to Deputy Mayor Schooler to start the conversation.
Thank you, Mayor Mahe. I think it's just important to reiterate some of your the background information. I also feel that we are coming in at a time when we are having to take on decisions that have been made previously and looking at the future of Tauranga, looking at the positive side of what the future will be in the next 1 to 5 years, and that some of those decisions, in hindsight, we might have made them differently. We certainly, I think, would have got more information and options, but I am comfortable, having read what's been prepared for us, to say that those are decisions that have been made, and we know the significant cost, or an estimate or an opinion of a significant cost to go back on those decisions. I think the change in the government policy allowing us to find an alternative to IFF funding only last week does demonstrate the agility that we as a council will need to have, but from a perspective of transparency and value, I am very comfortable that we are moving debt, transferring debt out of the infrastructure financing and funding and fund something, IFF, into the LGFA. And I think we are number one, as Mayor Mahe has said, it means we're being transparent. It is on our balance sheet. It has always been debt. I think it's good that we are being transparent and it's there. And the fact that it's a cheaper funding method, I understand about $1 million a year less in interest costs is a positive thing. And I think it's really important that we are open about the fact that although there's been a change in the ceiling, that we are definitely not therefore automatically saying, what can we do? What more can we do? Because we are still saying we want to make sure we're adding value to our to the people of Tauranga, and that we are making decisions today that are, I believe we're all being very cognizant of, is this adding value to the people of Tauranga, and are we progressing a project which they have been consulted on and has been there has been very positive feedback about.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to discuss?
Clarification. So we're not speaking to a resolution. We're just having an informal discussion, debate, sort of sharing our feelings and thoughts about it.
Yes, we're moving towards the resolution, but you know, I'm happy to discuss your thoughts and how you got there.
Well, I prefer to do it after a motion is put.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Save my breath.
Therefore, if we can just display the motion. Obviously, there is a couple of changes, so we'll just have an opportunity to read through that. Sorry, Councillor Crowther.
Are we able to move an amendment to that at this stage?
We'll just you can obviously recommend an amendment if you'd like.
Recommend an amendment. Yeah. Yep. Or we could put. I would recommend we revise the A. I've sent through a proposed amendment, which has from A to P in there.
Okay.
So I can.
In fact, there is no mover yet of this motion, so you've got no motion at all on the table
So
yet.
I'll move the amendment. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we'll yeah. Sorry, follow.
Yes.
Yeah.
That substantive first
before we
further. Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Well, can you see that whole?
So what we've put forward is a staff recommendation based on the report information. So the council, a councillor needs to move a motion. You may wish to use this as a base, or you may wish to alternative or a modified one of this. So that's absolutely at the discretion of whoever wishes to move a motion.
Yep.
We do it separately, step by step, or I don't know how what's the feeling?
So the changes from what was in the report that was published is what's in red, the text in red. Can you just take that paragraph disclosure off, Coral? That none of the black thing at the end of every sentence, just the, so it's easy to read. That's it. No, one to the right. Yep, cool. So what's in red is additional, and that is when Paul spoke, he talked about the credit rating announcement, which was made after the report had been released. So, and that's why also we've added some more words around a few things because of those issues that came up as a consequence of that.
Or did you want to speak to the revised F?
The revised F, yes, the revised F is reflecting the fact that this isn't, there's no more debt being generated. It effectively is a transfer of debt from what was going to be funded through Crown Infrastructure Partners and the IFF levy, which will now appear on our balance sheet. So it will show on our debt figures, but it's no new debt.
Has everyone had? Oh, we'll just keep going through. Yeah. Yeah, so the changes there around attachment 5 is what will be in the publicly excluded section. So that's the. So I'll move this motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Taylor will second. Now happy to have any discussion or hear any amendments.
I'd like to move an amendment to the motion. I sent through Coral items proposed B, C, D for that. I'm happy to read them out, or
we'll try to get them up on the screen if we can.
Yep, happy to read them out. Item B proposed, which just shunts the other ones down. It doesn't alter anything that's existing there, just adds. So B is notes the context of uncertain funding, financing and project costs, including but not limited to Te Manawataki o Te Papa and National Land Transport funding for key Tauranga transport projects. C is request staff to provide the 16 September council meeting with updated 2024-34 long-term plan project budgets and a detailed financial report, including latest debt figures. And D is request staff to provide the 16 September council meeting with an issues and options paper on a 2024-34 long-term plan amendment to be consulted on by 30 April 2025.
Second for discussion.
Clarity, Mayor Mahe. So what are you proposing these instead of the substantive motions, resolutions that are here? No,
they're additions.
Additions.
Through the chair, they are correct. Mayor Mahe was right that these are additions. That's why I wasn't quite sure when to throw them out there. But these are not to change anything else that is there. It's just to add 3 further points onto that. Yep.
Yeah.
Through you, just one point of clarification, the issues and options paper, can we just be clear that that would be a paper that would talk about the opportunities and timing for a long-term plan amendment, as opposed to any detail, obviously, of what that might look like, but actually how we might achieve that.
Yeah, I'd also maybe defer. I'd had a conversation with Councillor Morrison. He was more used to the technical aspects of this. So I think you thought initially as an option paper would carry out what I was hoping to achieve, which was some certainty around putting in place a long-term plan, what the timing would have to be, what the consequences were. I speak to that.
All right. Yeah, if you've got, if you want to talk to it, please.
Yeah, thank you. Now, for this project, council is paying an undisclosed but significant amount to Willis Bond as a developer, and we haven't received that information yet. Is paying significant amounts to the company 22 and to Manawataki board to govern the delivery of the project. It's also paid an undisclosed amount to purchase the art gallery land, yet there is a lack of agreement or clarity within art circles, let alone beyond, about that deal because of its secrecy. And I've had a number of people come to me since becoming a councillor who are concerned about that issue. So despite all that, this project has already had serious cost blowouts, changes of scope, value engineering, multiple contracts signed confidentially, and reassurance from TCC that everything's on track as per the 2022 plan amendment. Then quite clearly, after looking at more than 50 documents on this, it is clear things are not on track financially. Despite significant changes to the scope and design of this project, to the costings, projected external funding, the commissioners have signed up Tauranga ratepayers to contracts worth many tens of millions without having agreed funding in place. We're told they've already signed us up to over $100 million, although we've yet to see all the evidence for that. I received an independent legal opinion that says that is entirely possible, but it could only be the case if there are other contracts that councillors have not yet been shown, binding council to large payments or large penalties. If the Minister of Local Government hadn't made his announcement 1.5 weeks ago, this discussion would be about whether to reapply for, as we've heard, very expensive IFF financing, which the government turned down initially. So without that financing, we were told TCC would breach its debt limit and have to refinance all its debt at a higher cost. So as it stood, the commissioners had literally signed up the people of Tauranga to an unfunded project. Instead, thanks to the minister's decision to allow us to take on more debt, this debate is now about whether we are backing ourselves into a corner and potentially pushing rates increases higher than the 164% figure in the long-term plan. What is clear is that A, there's been a lack of transparency around many aspects of this project. B, the Commission has made reckless decisions financially. C, the definition of external funding changed, with asset sales now by far the largest component, and they are not external, not to ratepayers anyway. D, the 46 million of funding from parking fees is not all, as we've heard, just due to this project, let alone external to TCC. E, the Commission has signed contracts that we're told mean that we could pay more than half the total cost of the library, even if we cancel before this construction contract is signed. If we're being asked to sign this contract without the proposed higher debt ratio in place. G, the scope of the library changed significantly from 4 stories to 3. H, the library also underwent value engineering to further cut costs. I, despite all that, the library and associated components are still going to cost 16% more than what was consulted on in the 2022 long-term plan amendment. Worse, it's going to cost ratepayers at least 25% more than the net cost after grants, in quotes, stated in the long-term plan amendment. Even worse, the additional operating costs for the library, i.e. on top of the current library budget, have increased by 52% from what was stated in that plan. Interestingly, the museum exhibition centres only had a 17% increase, but the civic whare operating expenses have increased to apparently 2.4 times what was stated in that plan without an explanation. So the 2022 long-term plan amendment stated this: as we firm up our funding options, we will check in at key project milestones to confirm we have the investment we need before we proceed. That was explicitly stated by commissioners 2 public meetings saying they would go back to the public should that happen. Now is the key project milestone. Newly elected councillors, a major contract to sign. So it's the perfect time to commit to do that.
Right, thank you, councillor Crowthers. We are due a break. So I think it's probably a good time to just adjourn now. We'll have 10 minutes and we'll re-adjourn it at 11:40. Thank you.